Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. The disgraced American Jarrell Big Pharmacy Miller has been unceremoniously dumped from the WBO rankings following multiple failed doping tests ahead of what would have been his scheduled fight with Anthony Joshua on June 1st. So the World Boxing Organization, WBO as shorthand, is the first sanctioning body to react. And despite some of the previous statements from Eddie Hearn in the months leading up to what would have been a fight on June 1st, Miller was not ranked across all the sanctioning bodies. As we know, he wasn't in the WBC, he wouldn't sign up to the clean boxing program, and boy does that look suspicious now. Also, he was dumped from the IBF rankings about 9 months ago when he turned down a fight with Kubrat Pulev. He's never made a return to the IBF rankings. He only had 2 rankings. One was the WBO, where he was at number 3. The other was the WBA, where he was at number 2. So the first ranking update to come out since that news broke of his multiple failed doping tests, his sheer stupidity, injecting drugs into a system, trying to crib an advantage, he's been dumped from the WBO ranking, so gone altogether. So in his place, Tyson Fury moves up 1 place to take over where Jarrell Miller had been. See here on screen. And interestingly of note as well here, number 8, Luis Ortiz enters the rankings. He was previously not in the WBO rankings. And also Carlos Takam, he comes in at number 12. He effectively replaces Bryant Jennings, who's out of the rankings altogether. He had been at 11 last month. So I'm not so much talking about the rankings for the WBO, more about the Miller situation. So why would he have been dumped from the rankings? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory, but the WBO regulations, so Section 19, failure of the champion and or WBO participant to comply with the terms of a World Championship contract or the World Championship rules. So one part of it here, or otherwise has tested positive for an illegal or performance-enhancing drug. And there's another section which I'll draw your attention to, Section 28, drugs or stimulants. The use of illegal drugs or performance-enhancing drugs or stimulants before or during the championship contest by any of the contestants shall be sufficient cause for the disqualification of the contestant guilty of said use. The determination of illegal drug use or performance-enhancing drug use or stimulants use under this section or Section 19A may be made only by the host commission for the contest or the WBO Participants Licensing Commission if supported by test results by WADA, VADA, or any internationally recognized anti-doping entity. And there has been some question about, well, what exactly is going to be happening with Miller, because you may have seen this interview on Fight Hub with Eddie Hearn talking about Jarrell Miller wasn't actually licensed by the New York Commission at the time that he failed those tests. He hadn't reapplied for his license, so all they could do was deny him a license, but he wasn't under the auspices of the New York Commission at the time he failed the test. So a bit of a grey area, and it's led to some to speculate what will happen with Jarrell Miller. But I think from what we can read from this Section 28 in particular, that the WBO does have some teeth, because obviously Miller was going to be fighting for one of 3 titles against Anthony Joshua, one of them being the WBO. So he's failed this test. It was an in-competition test ahead of a scheduled fight, which that belt would have been on the line, the heavyweight world championship, and obviously backed up by supporting results. And I'm pretty sure that under this whole situation, they will now have to go away. Their championship committee or whichever body within the WBO or entity or panel or whatever they have set up will consider this case, as will the others, I'm sure too, another being the IBF and also the WBA. So the various sanctioning bodies are going to be looking at this case, and I just see this dumping out of the rankings to the WBO being the first salvo in that process. They're not going to stand for it. There's going to be something that will happen. They will have some teeth in the situation, but how deeply they bite will actually be the big question now, because sanctioning bodies don't always see things the same way. Remember Luis Ortiz with his blood pressure medication. WBA banned him for a year, and also there was the WBC, which effectively cleared him. So it's going to be, interesting, because obviously with Miller not being licensed, but he was going to be in a championship fight, and there are results on the record that these sanctioning bodies can fall back on. It's hard to know how much wriggle room or how much grey area there really is for Jarrell Miller, but with the sanctioning bodies themselves, they are a big question sometimes. One might say give a 1-year ban, one might give a 3-year ban. We just don't know. Even precedent isn't something to go on, because these sanctioning bodies just go where the wind blows, effectively making rulings up as they go. There's loopholes galore, so maybe Jarrell Miller will be able to get out of some of the potential punishment that fans would like him to see. And what that should look like, everyone's got a different view. I did a poll recently, and some wanted a life ban. That was about 50%. About 30% wanted a 2 to 3 year ban, and about 15 or 20%, the remainder, whatever, 6 months or less. So divergent views among fans. But this is a serious and systematic case of doping. So I would expect that something is going to happen here. But even if it didn't, let's go worst case scenario, that for whatever reason, through loopholes or grey area, that Jarrell Miller can somehow get out of this and, escape a ban of sorts. He will be persona non grata. No one will want to touch him for a big fight unless there is serious drug testing in place. And even then, there's a big question now about his legacy, his reputation, and in the time that he's not in a fight or ahead of a scheduled fight in testing, what sort of advantages for the long term from the substances that he's been taking has he already got? Because there is some documented evidence of, in sprinters, for example, who failed doping tests, who've been on the juice for a long time, performance-enhancing substances, who've actually continued and maintained a benefit from their doping, a long-term benefit. Some sprinters who've been caught doping have posted times that they wouldn't have been expected to post in their mid to late 30s, and generally sprinters are on the decline by that stage, and you can go look that up yourself. But there's a number of sprinters who've suspiciously had some of the fastest times in history, and they should be actually on the downslide of their career, but they have been caught previously doping and had long bans. So it's going to be interesting now to see what exactly the sanctioning bodies are going to do. Is there going to be a consistent theme across what they end up doing with Jarrell Miller, or is he going to find some sort of loophole? But we will be looking to the WBO, WBO and the IBF to do something. And we've seen a first step here with the WBO dropping him from its rankings. The WBA rankings, they get updated at the end of the month. I would expect him to be dropped at that point as well. We shall see. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.